Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We are here live on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. Today is Wednesday, May 8th, and we have a full show for you here today. I've solicited some listener questions earlier today on Twitter, so we will be diving into answering some of those. And as always, if you are watching live, feel free to join in the chat. You can obviously leave any comments about what I'm talking about today, or if you have any questions that you want to ask here live, I will certainly get to answering those as well. So any questions you can throw into the chat. First, though, if you are watching here live today, please make sure you are subscribed to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel, which is where you are right now. Leave this video a like if you feel so inclined. We host these live episodes every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So by subscribing to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel, you will make sure to not miss any of them going forward. Also, every Monday and Friday morning, we have new episodes of the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show up on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes. So make sure you are subscribed to the podcast feed as well. And then the best way to stay up to date with all of my content, whether it be my written work, which is on KentuckySportsRadio.com, part of the On3 Sports Network, whether it be this YouTube show, which is live every Wednesday, whether it be the podcast every Monday and Friday, or just much, much more, you can find all of that on my Twitter account at BRamseyKSR. So give me a follow there as well. So diving right into today's topics, again, it was just strictly questions that I will answer, a little Q&A here for this week's episode. And again, if you are just joining us and you have further questions, just drop them in the chat and I will get around to answering them at one time or another before we end today's show. So first question that came to me, again, after I solicited for some this morning on Twitter at BRamseyKSR, question came from a follower on Twitter there. What is the best possible way to get rid of the current transfer portal mess? Obviously, that is a little bit of a loaded question, and it's funny how it seems like every week or almost every show that I do right now, in one way or another, we end up talking about the transfer portal, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because let's face it, I think it's arguably the most pertinent topic in college sports right now is what is going on in and with the transfer portal. I mean, it is what dominates college basketball media and headlines and airwaves like this pretty much 24/7 at this point. So it's a good question. What is the best way to help get rid of the current transfer portal mess? And I agree, it is a little bit of a mess. And I think the easy answer, and I think the quickest, simplest answer is twofold. First off, we're going to get sort of a self fix starting next year, and that is when the kind of free fifth year from the shortened or canceled seasons from coronavirus, concerns goes away. Like we won't have these fifth year grad transfers and all that kind of stuff, and these guys that have already played 120 games going in for another season. That will, in theory, cease to exist. Now, like all this other stuff, I think it'll be interesting to see, does that actually occur? It seems like we've come to a point where the NCAA wields no real power. I mean, as one Division I coach told me via text recently about the May 1st deadline for transfers, is how everything is just one lawsuit away from being meaningless. I kind of had to laugh when he said that, but it really does seem to be true. I mean, all these things, like you just get an injunction or whatever. I'm not a lawyer, but these things just get a lawsuit levied against them, and then now it's kind of a free for all. So I do think there's probably some truth to, all right, yeah, we we say we're getting rid of the fifth year, Corona year, all that stuff, but is somebody going to test it? Is somebody going to, try to force their way into a fifth year? I certainly could see it happening. Now, how that gets ruled, I don't know. But in theory, to answer the question, take Kentucky's roster as an example. What do you have? Probably 4 of the 9 players right now are going to be fifth-year guys. Well, starting next year, that is not going to happen anymore. So that'll curtail a decent amount of the quote-unquote transfer portal craziness. Secondly, and what kind of goes back to the point about the lawsuits, like the transfer portal, period, point blank, black and white, was a one-time transfer rule. One time. And now it's 2 times, 3 times. It's a free-for-all. So if you go back to one-time transfer, then I think you'll see 2 things happen from that. One, people will just be more selective when transferring right, like instead of going somewhere as a freshman and maybe not having the role you wanted to have, or things not going quite as well, or you're a little unhappy, but you're not majorly unhappy. Maybe now you'll stick it out for year 2 because you don't want to burn your free transfer so early in your career. Or obviously the other side of it is that you do kind of back yourself into a corner and, all right, I transferred for greener pastures. Oh, shoot, they're not necessarily greener pastures, but now I'm here. Well, maybe that's not the best thing for the kid or even the school necessarily, but it does, again, at least curtail some of the craziness of the transfer portal because you just simply won't have the ability to have as many people in the portal as right now, where for some reason the initial rule just isn't followed or enforced. So I think that's, again, the easiest, most concise answer and probably the clearest path to cleaning up the craziness is the 5th year just kind of matriculating out of circulation, and that'll get rid of a lot of transfers. It's just the no more 5th year starting next year. And then secondly, going back to the way it was meant to be and actually enforce it as a 1 year or a one-time transfer rule. I think that would significantly cut down on the number of names in the transfer portal. So I think that is what you could look for if you're wanting to kind of crack down on the insanity that is the living, breathing organism of the transfer portal. Second question. I got this from a few different points of view, a few different listeners, but pretty much the people are just asking about Trent Noah and his connection to the Kentucky Wildcats. Will he end up at Kentucky, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, Trent Noah from Harlan County, Kentucky. I think I'm an Indiana high school guy, not a Kentucky high school guy, but I think he's top 10 career scoring in the state of Kentucky. Obviously, Travis Perry is the all-time leading scorer in the state of Kentucky, also committed or signed to play for Coach Mark Pope. But Trent Noah was headed to South Carolina to play for Coach Lamont Paris, asked out of his national letter of intent with the he said in his announcement that he planned on landing closer to home. So I know Kentucky's obviously been rumored. Tennessee has been a name out there. Even Western Kentucky has been a name out there. I think Louisville probably as well. But this is a guy, 3-star prospect, top 150 national prospect. He's actually ranked 150 in the On3 industry ranking, a little bit higher by On3 themselves, and just a solid national 3-star recruit, 6'6", and can absolutely shoot the basketball. Made over 100 threes this past year at Harlan County High School, and he's a guy that I do think, you always start to say this about white dudes and shooters and all this kind of stuff, but he does. He fits what you kind of close your eyes and you envision a Mark Pope offense. I mean, let's face it, he's like a lot of the guys at BYU. Now, do you just want a bunch of BYU guys at Kentucky? No, probably not, but we've got a bunch of dudes right now. So I think that Trent Noah is the personification of what we would like to see those kind of final few spots in each class for Kentucky under Coach Pope going forward, what we would like those spots to look like. I've said it on Twitter at BRamseyKSR several times just in the last week or so since Kentucky's roster has grown to 9 people. How do you fill out the roster? Well, in my opinion, one of the spots has to go to either Jackson Robinson, Wooga Poplar, or Chaz Lanier. More on that in a second. But you get your star, you get your go-to scorer, your dynamic playmaker, you get one of those guys. And then you probably have a role for a backup 4-man still. So that gets you from 9 to 11. All right, so what do you do with 12? What do you do with 13? I don't mean this to say that Trent Noah's going to be the 12th man or the 13th man. I don't know how that's going to work out. That's what practices are for. But he's, to me, the epitome of a guy that fits those. Like, if you're just rounding out the roster, get the 3-star kid from the state of Kentucky. Worked out pretty well in the past with guys like Dominique Hawkins and guys of that nature. So I think that's the exact blueprint that we're looking for. A guy who, let's face it, Trent Noah is worth more NIL-wise at University of Kentucky than he is anywhere else in the country. He brings no value, essentially, to South Carolina. The way things are now, I'm sure he would have made some money, but there would have been no reason for him to. At Kentucky, heck, he's actually worth something. He actually has some intrinsic value to go be in a car commercial in Harlan County or whatever. Like, he's going to help you probably sell some cars, and he can do a autograph signing at KS Bar and Grill and all that good stuff. I think that he actually brings, so from his selfish standpoint, he's probably worth more at a place like Kentucky. Also, from Kentucky's standpoint, probably a guy that is more likely to stick it out. Again, he's making this transfer, from his own words, to be a little bit closer to home, and he's a guy, because of the way he can shoot the basketball, some of his size on the perimeter, there's absolutely a path to him maybe playing sooner rather than later, but certainly down the road as he continues to develop athletically and physically a little bit and get a little more skilled off the bounce down the road. Then I think that this is a guy that, as a junior, he can probably be a primary rotation guy. Absolutely. Again, if he isn't sooner than that. But I think that Kentucky and Coach Pope would be well served to have a Trent Noah essentially in every class. We know, right now, Kentucky has gotten better kind of with the top end talent. You're going on a few year stretch here where you have Reed Shepherd, who was a borderline 5-star kid. You had Trent Perry, who was a consensus 4-star player. Obviously now Trent Noah, who's a consensus 3-star national prospect. You have a guy like Jasper Johnson in the next class. Even Caden Magwood, if you want to count him as a Kentucky kid. You have Gabe Weiss in the 2026 class. And I'm sure some other names that I just don't know. But you have some top-end national talent. But Kentucky probably, you might not always have those, 4-star, 5-star kids that are kind of at their core Kentucky recruits. But you're always going to have a kid who's about 150th in the country. Well, to me, you just start locking down that kid as that development piece. That's how you get older. You don't want to exclusively get older via the transfer portal, because that just requires you to be right so often at such a high rate. I think that can be tricky, and you saw that a little bit with Arkansas last year. Like, it worked at a really high level for a couple of years, and then it worked really poorly for a year. And in the grand scheme of things, maybe you make that trade-off. Like, I think as Kentucky fans, we would all go to back-to-back Elite Eights to miss the tournament one year at the right now. But I think that again, assuming that Kentucky shows interest in Trent Noah, I think it's pretty likely that he ends up at Kentucky. And to me, that is the perfect way to round out those final few scholarships, those final couple scholarships on this roster. Speaking of rounding out the roster, and a name that we just mentioned a little bit, listener asks about Chaz Lanier. If you listen to that Ion College Basketball podcast with Matt Norlander and those guys, which I actually really enjoy that podcast, Norlander dropped a hint, I guess if you want to call it, a little bit of scuttlebutt about Chaz Lanier potentially leaning towards, or Kentucky leading for, the North Florida transfer. Now, this is a guy that this had a like it's kind of crazy what happened between his junior and senior year. I mean, this is a guy freshman year essentially didn't play in the games for North Florida. Became a solid rotation player as a sophomore and junior, but averaged 4.5 points. Really started to shoot it better as a junior, but still relatively low volume. Wasn't playing any more than 20 minutes a game, averaging like 4.5 points. Then last year, he's Antonio Reeves, essentially, just at North Florida in the ASUN instead of the SEC. So there's a little, there's levels to this a little bit, but dude averages 19.7 points per game, shoots 44% on 7.5 3-point attempts per game. That's over 3 per game. Dude made more threes than Antonio Reeves, a lot more threes, 106 threes last year as a senior. 6'4" guard from Nashville, Tennessee. There was a lot of Tennessee smoke when he went into the portal. I believe there was even a non-contact designation for him. But the winds seem to be shifting a little bit towards Lexington. Now, I have no inside knowledge on that, but for a while now, I've had him, at first it was, I wanted 2 of the 4. I wanted Kobe Brea, Chaz Lanier, Wooga Poplar, Jackson Robinson. Kentucky landed Kobe Brea, obviously. And I think we all sort of have just kind of kept Jackson Robinson in our back pocket throughout this process, where it sort of seemed inevitable that he would eventually make his way and follow Coach Pope to Lexington. I'm not here to say that that was wrong or is wrong or it's not inevitable. I have no idea. It just outside looking in, it kind of feels like it maybe isn't as likely as we all thought it would be. And now Lanier's kind of coming around. So again, now it's just Poplar, Lanier, or Robinson for the you just need to get one of those 3 now. And to me, they're all similar enough. They're all good enough. I really, truly don't necessarily care which one it is. I just want one of them. And to me, it can go to the first guy to make a move. And I would be really excited. I mean, again, this is a guy that shot the cover off the ball last year, got infinitely better between his junior and senior year. Now, to me, there's 2 worries there. One, making the jump from the ASUN to the SEC. We even saw with Antonio Reeves. He was really good. Last season is his first year in Kentucky, but came off the bench. Heck, early in the season, didn't even play a ton. And then as a senior, or 5th-year senior, becomes essentially a borderline All-American. So would it take Chaz Lanier kind of that transition year? Well, even if he's more of a 6th man than the star, well, yeah, I know we all kind of want a star, but heck, we'll take SEC 6th man of the year if that's the role he ends up being. And to me, that's probably his floor. Now, your other concern may be a little bit of regression when you go from not even making 1 3 a game to making 3.3 threes per game and you shoot 44% from 3. Like, okay, what happens if he shoots 36% from 3 next season? Is he just not as effective? Well, probably so. But this is a guy, he was also over 60% from 2 last season. That's why I kind of likened him to Antonio Reeves. He was 80% from the free throw line. This is a legitimate threat to be a 50, 40, 90 guy. And yeah, is he going to average 19.7 points per game at Kentucky? Probably not, but can he average 12 to 14, 15? I don't really see why he couldn't. So if the winds do continue to blow in that direction, then I would be very happy if Kentucky were to land them. Another question I got was actually just kind of in reference to another tweet from Truly Donovan, and I commented on this morning actually at Ramsey KSR on Twitter. But Truly Donovan tweeted out a GIF of, I guess that's Woody from Toy Story coming out of a box and kind of flicking his hat and saying, "Hey, I'm here." But the caption or the tweet says, "Players in the portal circling back with teams that were interested in them a month ago." Well, that certainly is. We see that happening. I mean, heck, it happened a little bit with Kobe Brea and how that turned out. Some people are reading the tea leaves, like, is that happening with Great Osabor after he takes some of these visits and you make some of these NIL demands, or you want a number and you kind of realize, all right, that was lofty. That's not out there. So now let's kind of go back to square one and let's ask for a different number. And maybe all of a sudden we kind of meet a little bit easier. Now, what I said to this, and as a as somebody with 6 years of Division III coaching experience, I certainly felt this. But what Troy said about everybody circling back months later to the people who were interested in them a long time ago, that's the life of every small college coach in the country. Nobody wants to be. Just take right now, for example. It's May 8th when I go out on the AAU circuit this coming weekend in Indianapolis. There's going to be several of my Division III and AIA Division II coaching buddies out in the gym between these two events in Indianapolis. One of which is one of our prep hoops events. There's going to be a lot of really good small college players in these gyms this weekend. There's going to be a bunch of really good small college coaches out. The players, not all of them. Some of them understand their level and all that, but a lot of guys they don't want to, they don't want to field phone calls from Division III coaches in May before their senior year. They want to see what scholarship opportunities are out there for them. They want to see if they can if they can get Division Is interested in the live periods, etc. Now, a lot of times it's not the way it works, but that's what they're thinking about. And then, Division III coaches and EIA coaches are going to spend all year recruiting them. It's kind of going to be like the girl you're interested in that isn't maybe all that interested in you, and that's how it's going to feel for a while. And then all of a sudden, come April after their senior season, and they don't have any more basketball games to play. Now all of a sudden, you're more receptive to the small college coaches that have recruited you for a year, shown interest, really wanted you, and that's kind of what we're seeing, I think, a little bit in the transfer portal. So all these high major Division I coaches get a little bit of taste of the Division III medicine here of, hey, we're interested in you, man. We really want you to come to wherever. All right, yeah, thanks, coach. I'll see what my options are. And then, all right, options weren't what you wanted them to be. Circle back. Now all of a sudden, they're a lot more interested in what you have to sell. So I did think that Troy Donovan tweet this morning was interesting. Last topic I have here from listener submitted questions before the show. Again, if you're watching live and you have any more questions or just comments or whatever, feel free to leave them in the chat and I will get to them after I answer this last question. But again, a couple people asked something around the same ilk, and that was about St. John's. Recently, Coach Rick Pitino has landed two of the best guards, most dynamic playmakers out of the transfer portal in Utah's Davon Smith and Seton Hall's Kadary Richmond. Now, there's going to probably be some games where it feels like we're laying bricks watching these guys. Kadary Richmond, not much of a shooter. Davon Smith can make them. And he shot over 40% from three last season, but it was relatively low volume. Didn't even make, I guess he did make 1 3 per game because he didn't play in all the games played. Made 29 threes in 28 games. But Kadary Richmond, on the other hand, he made, he was 27%, made 17 threes in 35 games. So essentially a non-shooter. That's what I would consider him. But Kadary Richmond, like every athletic and physical tool in the world, is just going to get to the rim, brute strength. Two guys that are like walking triple-double threats when they step on the court. Davon Smith had a couple triple-doubles last season. Kadary Richmond, looking at his stats right now, 15.7 points, 7 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 2.2 steals per game for Davon Smith, 13.3 points, 6.3 rebounds, 7.1 assists, 1.1 steals. It is going to be really hard to score on this backcourt. You're going to be excellent on the ball in the perimeter. I think Kadary Richmond is the perfect guard to play alongside Smith because he can contrast. Smith's just a littler guy. Kadary Richmond is a massive dude, especially as a guard on the perimeter. So I think they play off of themselves pretty well, other than the overall lack of shooting. But just as a 1-2 playmaking punch, immediately as good as there is in college basketball. Playing for Coach Rick Pitino, you know that's going to be a lot of fun to watch in appointment television now, especially early in the season when the Red Storm are playing. So excited to see how that plays out. Again, I worry about the shooting a little bit, but I think defensively they're going to be elite. Playmaking-wise, they're going to be elite. And when you have guys like Smith and Richmond, it's going to make everybody else on the floor better. Now, it's going to clog things up possibly a little bit, but if you can surround them with a little bit of shooting, then I start to get really interested in what St. John's can do this coming season. So there you have it for today's episode. Got through some of those listener questions. I appreciate everybody who submitted those. If you do have a question, if you're watching this sometime in the future and you didn't get a question in and something you would like my opinion on, just drop it in the comments and I will answer you there. Or you can obviously hit me up on Twitter at BRamseyKSR and I'll answer it right back to you. So make sure you are following me there on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel here, the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show, where every Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time we host these live episodes of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. And then also catch the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast every Monday and Friday mornings on Spotify or wherever you do listen to your podcast episodes. Thank you all for tuning in today. Please like the video if you are watching this and if you've stuck around throughout the show. Thank you all for tuning in and have a great rest of your week.